Commission, Library and Education Commission to order. Danica, can you take roll call?
I certainly can. All right, beginning with you, Chair Wendy.
I am here.
Fantastic. Vice Chair Magana.
He's got baby stuff, so he might be here a little late.
He's excused.
He's excused. Okay. Commissioner Snyder. Absent. Let's see. Commissioner Urichu.
Present.
Fantastic. Thank you. Commissioner Jolly.
Present.
Great. Commissioner Allen.
Present.
Fantastic. Commissioner Rivers.
I'm here.
Great. Thank you. Commissioner Ramtukar is going to be absent. Commissioner Thorson.
Here.
Thank you. Commissioner Mendoza.
Here.
Commissioner Trudell.
Present.
Fantastic. And Commissioner Melillo.
Here.
Great. Thank you. Well, then you definitely have a quorum.
All right, thank you. I just want to remind everyone to stay on mute unless you have a question, and then we're going to do the votes of aye, nay, and abstain. Those are the three. We're not going to do roll call votes. And if everything's being recorded for the city. So our first action, I think, is the next slide. Right, call to order the meeting. We did that. I need a first on today's agenda so we can approve our agenda for today.
So moved, Commissioner Allen.
Thank you for also providing the example of how to say who you are so it's captured. Can I have a second?
Second, Commissioner Thorson.
Thank you. Any discussion on today's agenda that we need to correct or anything we need to do? All right, those in favor of moving through today's and approving today's agenda, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed, say nay. Any abstentions? All right, moving on. Moving on to our consent calendar for the regular meeting, January 20th, 2021. Can I have a first?
So moved, Commissioner Allen.
Thank you, Commissioner. Can I have a second?
Second, Commissioner Melillo.
Thank you. Any discussion? Okay, let's go for the vote. All those in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed?
Aye.
Aye. I'm sorry. Anybody opposed? Anyone need to abstain? Thank you very much. Moving on. I think we have no correspondence. Is that correct?
That is correct. No correspondence.
Wonderful. I see Councilwoman Arenas has joined us. Thank you. We're so happy to see you. Just wanted to say our special hi. We can now move to discussion and action, yeah?
I believe so. I don't see any members of the public waiting to speak, so I do believe we can move on from there. I'm not seeing anyone listed in attendees as waiting.
Thank you, Danica.
Of course.
All right, looks like we're ready for our adopt the annual commission budget position to council. We're going to have a presentation, and then this is an action item as we have to adopt it. Are we ready?
Let me see. All right. Andrea, are you ready to lead us in?
Yes, thank you. Good evening, everyone. So we'll be reviewing the annual commission budget position to council. And so in November, we formed the budget subcommittee, and that included Commissioner Trudell and Commissioner Mendoza. And so the memo was included in your packets. And the primary focus for this particular commission message included expanding library fines free from juvenile to all materials, approving ongoing city funding for the citywide digital inclusion initiatives, as well as maintaining current public service hours programming and services at all library locations. And so I don't know if Commissioner Trudell or Mendoza wanted to say anything, but everything was included in the packet, and there was a discussion at the last meeting in regards to Sunday hours. There was a question about that. And so although I know that Commission has continued to express interest in expanding hours at this point, there is some context in the message that was written up, but the primary focus, because of the city's general fund status, does include maintaining current public service hours. And so Commissioner Trudell and Mendoza, did you want to say anything about the budget message or?
Well, speaking, I think the obvious thing is dealing with COVID and the impact on personnel cutbacks and so forth, the reduction of 1.7 million. That was the focus of our feedback, decreasing program services and so forth and so on. I think it's pretty obvious that we're not in normal times now, and an effort's being made to retain as much of the community services as we can, but there's a certain limit because of COVID, the impact on employees and full-time people and so forth and so on. So I think we did a good job of getting as much of being as positive and getting as much of the stuff done that we think is good for the city of San Jose on a whole, but not giving away everything. And I think Patricia would back me up on that. I don't know if Patricia has any thoughts. One thing I would like to say is I really appreciate Andrea and all her efforts she did to explaining all this somewhat minutia to us. Budgeting is something I'm not all that familiar with, city budgeting anyway. I do manage to handle the checkbook okay, but that's about it. So on to Patricia if she has anything.
Just quickly wanted to thank you, Andrea, for all the support, all the help while we were writing this draft. And just wanted to quickly let you all know that we did take into consideration any suggestions that we obtained at the last meeting. And we know how essential, especially now, our libraries are. And so we did try to convey and focus on that message here, but we're open to any suggestions you guys may have.
So that concludes this item, unless anybody has any, wants to have any discussion about this message or any proposed edits. No? Okay.
Sorry, this is Wendy. I was trying to get off mute.
Oh,
I think we have to take a first to accept the draft, and a first and a second, and then we can have some discussion, yeah? So can I have a first on accepting the great work of our commissioners and our staff around our annual commission budget position?
Move to adopt the annual commission budget position. Commissioner Allen.
Thank you, Commissioner. Second.
Second,
Oh, go ahead.
second Commissioner Thorson.
Thank you, Commissioner. So let's open it for discussion. Would anybody like to either add some feedback or say this is good to go, or any other thoughts that you'd like to share with the team? If not, I have one. I just was looking at it and I wanted to again bring up or see if where, and maybe you can point it out if it is in there and I just missed it, which is quite possible, a discussion around equity, the city's equity position, and in particular women who are employed in the city, and how is the mayor looking at equitably laying off women and men across all departments and divisions and services. And since the library is predominantly made up of female staff, how does that play into our city's position around equity. And I'm not sure that it has to be called out exactly like that, but is there some thoughts around it?
So we did, Jill, did you want to talk about this? Or sorry, I saw you unmute. Okay. We did talk about equity and the city's equity process. The thing about, in terms of the specifics, we did talk about language and the language skills within the library, as well as the kind of diversity within the library, but we didn't get into the specifics about gender or any of that. And one of the things is that we, in particular as a department, I don't have access to that data. That's data that, you know, the HR department or perhaps employee relations, another city department would have to provide to us. And it's not, we had previously requested some data for one of our racial equity teams and still haven't received it. And so I think that data may or may not be published. I'm not sure, but at this point, we couldn't really wait any longer to include any additional data. I did find some general library studies, but they're pretty old in regards to the female-male ratio within the library. And so since they were pretty old, I think it was on ALA's website, I didn't include that information.
Got it. So I'm wondering if there's even just a sentence we can add around, not that we have the data, but ensuring that equity is looked at from this point of view across the city. If the majority doesn't want to do it, I absolutely understand. But I just don't want our library taking the biggest hit without all things considered.
Is your thrust, Tom here, is your thrust the fact that your opinion, I'm not sure, that most of the people that were impacted by the budget were female? Is that it? And so you wanted to see, what is it? What is the focus?
Yep, since we don't have the data and we don't know that, I just want to ensure, I'm thinking, I wonder if City Council and the mayor have that in view. And if not, I think we should make a marker around it. And I see Councilwoman Arenas with your hand raised. Yes, please. Love for you to weigh in.
I was waiting for like community at large to speak so I could speak. And I'm sorry, I'm out of turn. I apologize.
No, it's perfect.
So it's really good to see everybody here. And I'm really glad that you brought up that question. Part of my vision statement and part of what I heard from our community is that concern that one, you know, the women are paid tend to have a lower salary than men, and tend to work in lower paid jobs. And so they're the first ones to have lost their jobs across the country. I'm sure that San Jose is no different. And we actually had some statistics. I'm happy to share that with the group as a follow-up. And so one of the things that I mentioned in my vision is that we should be very aware of the impact when the job loss has on women, because there's a lot of professional advancement that has occurred over, you know, how many decades, and we're going to lose it at one full swoop with this pandemic. Not only because we've lost our job, but now we are responsible for childcare. And we are typically in that position for caring for our children. I'm not going to say that every family is that way, but typically childcare responsibilities are left to women. And now we kind of share them a little bit more with the men and or other women in our lives. Anyways, I'm more than happy to share that. The other piece is that Vice Mayor Jones and myself did develop a memo along with other items that related more to micro businesses and minority businesses and women-owned businesses for support for those types of establishments. That there's also a request to do a gender pay analysis for the city of San Jose. We were hoping that it would happen with Prop 15. Unfortunately, California didn't agree with the rest of us. And so I had a memo already pinged in case we won that fight, that we would have this analysis. And because it didn't, I connected it with another effort with Vice Mayor Jones. And so that's going to happen. I know that you can't wait for that kind of information. We kind of do work at a very slow rate, but I can prompt it and I can prod it to see if we can move any faster. But I'm really happy to hear you say that. And I think that that's also something that we should be very aware of in terms of advocating and being very bold about defending the advancement that women have made in the last decades, so that we don't lose our place in the line. So thank you. Anyway, so those are my comments. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Councilman. We'll definitely take you up on any data you can give us for this effort. So my only then proposal on this particular topic is to either enter some sort of line around, we believe the mayor and the folks in making decisions will take into account that the library is a predominantly female workforce, that as it is related to the rest of the city, we want to make sure that that's also top of mind. It doesn't have to be, from my point of view, something very specific, but I would sure love to see a mention of it around it, if that's the will of the group.
So if there are no objections to the commission by the commission per the chair, we could the commission can accept or approve the statement with an addition by staff of either accurate data regarding the issue that we're discussing, or a generalized statement about the importance of gender equity in terms of considering layoffs and the like. And if that's the case, we could make those edits before signed off by the chairperson.
Yeah, I think that's wonderful, Jill. Thank you for that direction. Are folks willing to, oh yes, Tom, please.
Yeah, I was just wondering, Jill, what's the timeline involved in getting that data? Is it going to be timely enough for the submission?
Yeah, so we would work on getting that within the next week or so. And if we can't, we'll just put in the more generalized statement. But I'll work with Andrea to follow up.
Works for me.
All right, looks like we have then, all right, help me out. So now, since we have, we are gonna go for accepting with the amended language.
I was gonna say, yeah, so I think the language would then be basically the commission would motion to approve as amended the commission's budget position statement with the addition of more precise data and/or a generalized statement.
Thank you, Danica. Can I have a first on that? Tom, I see your hands raised.
I think you're muted, Tom.
But I'm not, I'm muted. Never mind. Yes, I make the motion.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Keep telling me to turn off my mute, and so I do, and then I have to talk. And
I know, and your hand's still raised, so I'm gonna just keep calling on you for everything.
Right.
Can I have a second, please?
I'll second it, Commissioner Jolly.
Thank you, Commissioner Jolly. All right, any other discussion on the amended version of the vote? All right, let's move to a vote. All those in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Nay. Any abstentions? All right, motion passed. Thanks, Andrea, for the work, and the commissioners for the work. It's wonderful. Moving along, we're now in an informational item B, one of my favorites. I hate to say, you're not supposed to have favorite children, but update from the early education quality standards presentation. Love to hear about it. And away we go.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Commissioner Mahaney Guru. Good evening, commissioners. My name is Araceli Delgado Ortiz, and I'm the Early Education Manager for the San Jose Public Library. Tonight, I'm joined by Laura Buzo, Recreation Superintendent with the Parks, Recreation, and Neighborhood Services Department, and Nari Furterer, Early Literacy Librarian with the San Jose Public Library. This evening, we will be presenting our annual report on the early education quality standards. Next slide, Danica, please. Perfect, thank you. Before I get started, I want to do a brief overview of the standards as a quick refresher. The early education quality standards are comprised of 8 program quality standard areas that are proven to promote positive child outcomes. Each standard area is equally important in providing the framework for building strong early education programming. The early education quality standards in each standard area are organized into 4 categories that make up a quality continuum, measuring progressive levels of program quality as follows: basic quality not met, basic standard, proficient quality, and advanced quality. Within each standard area, the quality expectations are detailed with more specific focus areas. Upon assessment, if a program does not reach the basic standard, then it is categorized as basic quality not met, requiring immediate corrective action. Strategies that achieve basic standard, proficient quality, and advanced quality reflect the pathway for progressive continuous quality improvement for city programs to adopt, depending on their level of readiness, allocation of internal and external resources. The early education quality standards are designed to serve as an internal continuous quality improvement tool to support cities' early education programming across all departments by defining standards and identifying strategies that improve the quality offered through city programs. Next slide, Danica. Upon approval of the early education standards in March of 2019, city departments initiated and continued efforts to ensure that city-sponsored programs for children ages 0 to 5 align with the adopted early education quality standards. To initiate this work, each department identifies city programs and quality standard areas in which to develop target assessments and quality improvement plans. Danica, next slide, please. Here we go. That's the slide I was looking for. Thank you. In its first year of early education quality program implementation, the library focused on story time, which has the potential to play a critical role in school readiness and development of early literacy skills. Annually, the San Jose Public Library offers over 4,500 story times throughout the city, reaching approximately 28,000 children. The Parks, Recreation, Neighborhood Services Department focused their year 1 implementation efforts on the recreational preschool program, which citywide garners an attendance of over 650 preschoolers each year. At this time, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Laura to share with you more information about the Parks, Recreation, Neighborhood Services year 1 approach to the early education quality standards. Next slide.
Good evening, commissioners. In our first year of implementation, as mentioned, we focused on our recreation preschool program. With the support and generosity of First 5 Santa Clara County, we were able to pilot a Seeds of Early Literacy project at 11 classrooms listed here: Almaden, Noble, Evergreen, Mayfair, Roosevelt, Seven Trees Community Centers. The remaining 14 classrooms, we had them continue with their standard implementation model, so no changes were made to the 14 classrooms. What made us unique in this first year of implementation was that we were the first municipality in the state to implement the early education quality standards in this recreational preschool setting, as well as implement innovative training and assessment strategies. In our 14 classrooms, as we mentioned, we remain consistent. So we had no changes in our program, and this was really due to our limited resources and capacity. But with the support of First 5 and our partners, we had some innovative strategies that we implemented in our pilot. Next slide. So as part of our pilot project, as I mentioned, in our 11 classrooms, we implemented standardized training focusing on evidence-based and best practices. So we trained all of our staff, so 38 staff, over 95 hours of Seeds training on the framework and curriculum. We also provided child and classroom assessment tools, and then also the early education quality standards. We also implemented for the first time coaching and technical support with the support of 7 of our staff and over 1,300 hours. And so in this approach, we were able to provide individual classroom support to our instructors. We had master seeds coaches. And we also developed the early education quality standards, quality of improvement plan goals within each of these classrooms. We also implemented an evaluation and assessment framework. And again, this was also new to our program. We had 21 staff trained in that, and we spent over 1,400 hours in that area to make sure that our staff was well equipped and understood all the elements of the assessment tools. In the subset of students, we were able to assess 219 children between the ages of 3 and 5, focusing on the PALS and MyIGD. For the classroom learning environment assessments in the 11 classroom, we used the ELCO. And then in addition to that, we utilize the early education quality self-assessments that was mentioned previously across all of our 25 classrooms. And we also developed quality improvement plans in all of our 25 classrooms. In addition to that, we also had the support of ASR, Applied Survey Research, that was able to provide data entry, analysis, and reporting. Next slide.
Hello, commissioners. So I will be talking about the library and how we implemented for this first fiscal year. And we decided to use our story times as previously mentioned. It seemed like a natural outlet. We have the infrastructure already in place, an audience, a dedicated staff, and it just seemed like a natural approach for us. For our, I'll go over a quick review of our timeline. Prior to our year one implementation, we spent quite a bit of time before July preparing for the launch of the standards, of infusing the standards into our story times. That time was spent with training staff, preparing materials. And part of that approach was we took a three-prong approach in that period. We put together a committee with our librarians, and we were able to brainstorm together best practices in our field, in the library field, in regards to story times in general and story times that we host in SJPL. And we looked for the best practices that what was working for us. What did we want to keep? What did we want to strengthen? We also took that opportunity to look for areas of growth in our story time. What were some of the gaps that we could fill? And another outlet that we looked for was what I like to think of as room for renovation. What did we have that we could just sort of take apart and rebuild to make a more functional model, enhance efficiency, and really support our staff in presenting quality early education programming? And we did this approach. We took a lot, an equity lens, making sure that any changes that we incorporated into our programming, we made sure that we were intentional with the content that we provided, our materials, that we made sure that our community was represented through the books, through the songs that we hold during our story times. That being said, in July, we launched the new Storytime standards, the infused early education curriculum into our story times. Between September and November, all of our librarians who presented story times were observed. They were provided with coaching to make sure that the new standards were being implemented properly. And between November and March was when we held our site visits of starting to visit the branch libraries to further make sure that everything was just progressing as planned. Next slide, please. So one thing that we added to our system that is pretty new, not just for our system, but we believe on a pretty large scale for library systems, is the story time standards. From the research that we conducted, we did not find any other library system that has something like this in place. And what the story time standards are a guide for both new and veteran librarians that consist of best practices as previously mentioned, but they go really in depth into what librarians should be focusing on to provide intentional programming for their audience. It was designed so that we could provide consistency across the branches. Story times tend to have librarians that run the spectrum of the rock star performer who brings out the puppets and the instruments, to the librarian who's just a little bit more subdued and provides a calmer experience. And so keeping those that spectrum in mind, the Storytime Standards does help does support each librarian as they present their programming. One thing that we also added, as I mentioned before, how we were looking for room for renovations of our existing materials. Previous to the year one implementation, we circulated what we called storytime boxes throughout each of our 25 branches in the system. We had over 56 storytime boxes. Each box contains books, CDs, puppets, felt stories, anything and everything that the librarian would need to present their story time. Using these materials, we were able to incorporate the California Preschool Learning Foundations and align each of the boxes, which we reframed to curriculum boxes. We were able to align each of the curriculum boxes to one of the California Preschool Learning Foundations, and it provided a roadmap, a guide you could think of for librarians who were able to write more intentional story times. The curriculum that they followed really helped set a framework to help each child learn through their story time. Each story time began with leading questions and fun facts, and this was an opportunity for the librarian to introduce the story time, ask sometimes rhetorical questions, sometimes not. Depending on the age of the child, they would respond. But it was a way to see what the kids knew about the topic, what they didn't, and give them something to think about as they went through the story time. And it was also a way for librarians to provide talking points and prompts for caregivers to continue the conversation with the child after story time. Our early learning in action and ideas on how to expand the content were incorporated throughout the story time as talking points, questions that were asked during the reading of the book, questions that were asked in between songs, making sure that the songs and puppets and finger plays also matched the concept and further enhanced the child's knowledge of that concept. And for the initial year, the Storytime Standards were applied to 4 of our story times: our baby lap sit, infant toddler story times, our preschool story times, and our family story times. And next slide, please.
Thank you so much, Nari. As a licensed exempt provider, we knew that the city had the potential to raise early learning quality and options for the families by adopting and implementing the quality rating assessments. Year one implementation of the early education quality standards had its set of challenges: a pandemic, having to pivot programming models, and finding creative options of serving our community. But even through all the pivots, the teams found ways to turn challenges into opportunities. I'm going to turn it over to Laura to tell us more about PRNS's year one outcomes.
Thank you, Araceli. So as mentioned in year one, as I had mentioned earlier, we had our seats pilot site. So what we decided to do was to have 2 assessments, one specifically for the pilots and then one for the traditional, because we knew that we would naturally have some differences in the outcomes given our instructional approach had changed. So within the seats pilot sites, as you can see, PQS meaning program quality standard 1. So from 1 through 8, you can see program quality standard 2, child learning and development, program quality standard 3, curriculum and teaching practices, program quality standard 4, learning environment, program quality standard 5, staffing professional development, and program quality standard 8, equity, diversity and inclusion. You could see that we rated higher in our SEEDS pilot sites. And as mentioned earlier, that was because of the implementation of a standardized evidence-based curriculum. We had very standardized formal training model and instructional approach. We implemented the child and environmental classroom assessments. We also instituted the staffing and coaching for all of the instructors on a weekly basis throughout the months of September through March, when we ended with the changes due to the pandemic. And then we also instituted some data collection practices. So all of these really elevated us from basic to proficient. So as you can see in our traditional, it was no surprise that in those areas, we just were not able to elevate our program because we didn't have those formalized elements in our traditional recreation preschool model. So when you average those two scores between our SEEDS and our pilot, our SEEDS pilot and our traditional model, our overall rating is 1.3. So that takes us just above our basic standard. Next slide. So as mentioned, with the support of our partners, our year 1 outcomes is to continue within the proficient quality in our SEEDS pilot sites, focusing in those areas that I just mentioned earlier, our child learning and development, curriculum teaching practices, learning environment, staffing and professional development, equity, diversity, and inclusion. We are looking at continuing our partnership to support and sustain our proficient quality in the pilot sites. We know that in order to continue this continuum of quality, you have to continue these enhancements throughout. So it's not a one-time event, right? And it can change from year to year. It's very fluid. And so it's important to us that we continue to increase that. Implement evidence-based and best practices through a racial equity lens around curriculum and teaching practices, staffing and professional development, family engagement, assessment and evaluation. We continue to be more informed, provide more training, and also look at more creative ways and innovative ways of engaging our diverse community, our diverse students in some of the planning and instructional approaches. As mentioned earlier, the pandemic came in March. Although we had planned to have a full pilot with post-assessments, that was not possible. We had scheduled our post-assessments to take place in May, and March 16th, we closed all of our facilities. We weren't able to conduct any post-assessments. So all we have are pre-assessments. And so the nice thing is that at least we have some baseline data that we will be able to draw from. And we definitely learned a lot, even just from the baseline data. It gave us some great data and information and some best practices that we were able to really hone in that first year of implementation. Next slide.
So I will be talking about the libraries and our year 1 outcome with regards to story time. So I won't go over the program quality standards again. Laura already reviewed those for you. They are all the same for ours as well. We were fortunate to be able to do a pre-assessment to capture our status before the fiscal year. And that was just very it was wonderful for us because it was able to provide us, we were able to use the standards as a roadmap. We were able to use it to, we were able to see where we were, where there was room for growth, and where we should put our focus. We took advantage of using that last fiscal year to make very intentional and focused decisions and on where we wanted to focus our training for staff, for example, where we needed to make changes. And we heavily relied on the standards to help guide us in those factors. Part of our focus training included specific training in regards to providing inclusive story times, where we had a select number of staff receive in-depth training with follow-up coaching, for example, so that they could provide the best possible quality programming. And we were able to spread that out for our story times as well, providing coaching and mentoring as necessary. The standards gave us parameters to follow. And when we noticed that once we started making changes and improvements in one standards, it sort of led to improvements across the standards overall. Some of the areas do overlap. And as you could see from our pre-assessment rating, our overall rating was a 1.0. We were able to increase by a 1.5 points by implementing focused, intentional changes to our programs. Next slide, please. And everybody loves a success story. Our story times were were successful and popular to begin with, but now being more intentionally focused, more with having a specific framework, we found a lot of families responding positively. We saw our attendance numbers increase. Many librarians would tell us that they saw a lot of family members return, where sometimes at their story times, they noticed families would come just one time and then they wouldn't see them again. They noticed that once they started using the new framework, that families would return for follow-up visits, which just increased our ability to connect with the family and provide valuable resources that the library has to offer. As you can see from the percentage points at the bottom, the San Jose community values learning experiences, values opportunities to support their child's learning, and really sees the library as a trusted resource to support their child on their journey of development. And our story times in this new framework was able to help both new and veteran librarians with planning their programming to best support the children where they are. The intentional and focused eye on specific concepts, on using the storytime standards and the new curriculum with the alignment to the California Preschool Foundations made it much easier for our staff to create a learning environment where children could thrive. We found one of our veteran librarians told me that when she first started using the program, when she first started using the new framework, she found that she was able to be a little bit more flexible with her story time. She still did her story time. She did the songs and the books and the finger plays, but she found that she was able to take pauses and really respond to the children and follow their questions. It was a preschool story time. So the children had a lot of questions about the topic that she had at hand, and they were able to have a wonderful conversation and then continue with the story time. And she said the story time even went longer than the planned length, and the families were fully engaged and participating. And it's just one of the stories that I like to think about as a reason of why we put so much planning and effort into our programming, is to provide these opportunities of experiences for children that really put them in a situation to develop, to build those social relationships with their peers, provide outlets for their caregivers to also form those social connections during our stay and play portion that follows the story time. And And it's just a way for us to keep the community connected. Next slide, please.
Thank you so much, Noreen. Earlier in the presentation, I briefly referenced the pandemic. We cannot have a 2020 presentation without taking a brief moment to mention the effects that COVID-19 had in our year one implementation. Laura, can you share a little bit, please?
Yes. So as we all know, changes came dramatically on March 16th, and unfortunately, PRNS, like many public facilities, had to close. We had already our quality improvement plans in place. We had already checked in with our staff, but we were not able to finalize some of the quality improvement goals that we had written for our staff. For example, quality improvement program 1 around health and safety. We had one of the elements was facility safety. And some of the community center staff needed to conduct 4 fire drills within a year. And so the plan was that the staff would do that within our academic year, but because of the pandemic and the closure, we weren't able to complete all of them, right? So some of them may have been at 3 at that point and didn't quite get to that 4th one. So it's those type of goals that we were not able to complete in all of our quality improvement plans. As I mentioned also, our post-assessments with our SEEDS pilot sites, we had 219 children that we conducted pre-assessments with. And these were using 2 tools, so the PALS and my IGD. And then for the classroom environment, as I mentioned, we used the ALCO. And so we conducted all of the pre-assessments in September. And as we agreed with our evaluator, we were going to do a spring post-assessment in May, so that we really could get a good sense of the increase in learning. But again, that didn't happen. We were actually hoping, as we started hearing about COVID, that we could maybe even move up the assessments, but it just, everything happened so quickly that we didn't even get a chance to move on that, but that had been our plan. But again, the nice thing is that we do have some pre-assessment baseline data that'll be useful for us, has been useful to really understand the kind of school readiness skills that the kids that come to our recreation preschool program are between the ages of 3 and 5. Also, inadvertently, this impacted our year 2 implementation plan. We had to also just develop a contingency plan. And like many of you, we were kind of waiting to find out what the plans were going to be in the spring, and we're quite sure. Usually we start our recreation preschool enrollment process the spring prior to the fall. So normally we would have had our recreation preschool enrollment process about March, April. So just because we didn't know what was going to happen as far as our facilities, we had to wait. And then when we finally got the red light to, or green light to move, we realized that we were going to have to switch. So next slide.
So the impacts of the pandemic and shelter in place did have a major effect on our library services and our ability to connect and perform and present programming for children. Once the libraries, we were just in the middle of launching the new standards using the framework. We were about to start our site visits to evaluate and to observe and coach and work with our team on their story time, their environment, the learning environment of each branch, their ability to interact and form connections with the community. That was cut short in the middle of March, but we were able to use the standards to help us pivot during this time. And it really helped us focus our attention on how to how to make lemonade out of lemons with the pandemic. We realized that a large portion of our community shifted to the virtual world, just as we have. And we realized that although children were reading the reports in the news, realizing that children were experiencing more screen time, we wanted to play a role in helping create a screen time experience for the community that was educational, that was fun, and that would support learning even at a distance. With this new model, we were able to use the standards to really focus our programming. We started initially with our virtual story times, and I believe this began in May. We standardized it so that we worked with 5 librarians, dedicated, passionate with their work with children. We focused on our story times, on the 4 story times that I mentioned before that we focused on in the standards, and included music and movement because it's just sometimes just fun to have a little dance party to start off the week. And each week the librarians hold not just a story time, but it's a story time and stay and play. So the first half is a story time that is presented through Zoom and is also aired simultaneously on Facebook Live so that families anywhere can watch from home. But some families will sign up through Zoom, at which point they're allowed into a room where they have an opportunity to interact with the librarian. And this portion is not on Facebook Live, but during the stay and play portion, they have a chance to interact with the librarian, to interact with other children, to share different activities, to share the children are given an opportunity to share their favorite books, to work on a craft together with their grown-up, to to play a game with the librarian. It's a way for us to stay connected with the community, to support children so that they don't feel as isolated being away from home with so many sudden changes. And when we first started these story times, we noticed that a large portion of the attendees were preschoolers, and a lot of parents reached out to us and asked us for more preschool focused programming so that they could support their children as they are getting ready to enter kindergarten, as many preschools closed during shelter in place. And so we created 5 daily virtual preschool programs. These are on Zoom only, and they are not like our story times. There is literacy involved, but they are more focused, more intentional. As you can see from the titles, artsy ABCs, the children are developing their fine motor skills, learning to draw different objects based on the letter of the week. Math and play, they learn and discuss different math concepts through books, games, songs. ABC show and tell is a chance for children to share different objects around their house, expand on their vocabulary. What's in the box and we seek and find are game activities that promote critical thinking, problem solving, where children have to solve riddles and follow clues. And in many of these programs, children have a turn to be in the spotlight, which has the wonderful benefit of actually providing them with an opportunity to work on their public speaking skills at even 3 years old. Some of these children are just wonderful orators who love to share so many different ideas. And they are learning social emotional, they're also developing their social emotional skills as well through these virtual programs. They're learning to wait for their turn, to raise their hand, to be called on by the librarian. And it's a way that we've been able to support the community to provide a quality learning environment using the standards to help guide our program planning. And we also kept in mind that there were many digital barriers. Not every family has access to the internet, to a laptop even. Not many families are able to navigate through Zoom. It does definitely have its learning curve. We're able to provide non-digital programming for families. We have our telephone tales where families can call into a phone number and listen to stories in English, Spanish, Chinese, and Vietnamese. And that is updated regularly. So they can call in to hear a story Ready for K is a text messaging service where a family can sign up. They answer a few simple questions, basically just to get the age of their child. And then every week they receive a text message that has information about the development of the child and activities that they can do with the child at home to support their learning and development. We Share Stories is we've worked collaboratively with Civic TV, so that our We Share Stories, which were previously filmed read alouds with our librarians that we had on YouTube that are now being aired on TV, so that families can also access our story times through that venue as well. So we're reaching out as much as we can to connect with the community, and having the standards on hand has made this pivot into the virtual realm that much easier for us. Next slide, please.
Thank you, Nari. It's hard to believe that we're already 8 months into the year 2 of implementation. The PRNS and library team has been busy at work integrating best practices with the goal of raising early learning quality options for children and families of San Jose. Next, Nari and Laura will be sharing each department's outline plan for year 2 implementation of the standards.
So as mentioned, unfortunately, in year 2 of our plan, we had to redesign our recreation preschool program. Fortunately, we were able to launch a limited in-person programming. For those that are not familiar, county guidelines limit us to 12 children per classroom. So we had to be mindful of that. We were able to launch the in-person program at 6 community centers. And then we also launched our virtual program, which was completely new to us. And we launched that at 9 community centers with over 100 children participating in our virtual and 55 children participating in our in-person. We were fortunate enough to be able to work closely with Kate Horst, the developer of the Seeds of Early Literacy curriculum, and she was able to help us design our classroom or class instruction using the seeds, both for our in-person and our virtual program. We were also able to, with the support again of First 5 and Kate Horst, we were able to provide professional development, training, and coaching for all of our staff leading both our in-person and virtual programs so that there was consistency across the programs. And also to ensure that we had a very precise curriculum and instructional approach to teaching. We also, in our in-person, we were able to, again, utilize nationally recognized assessments tools, both evidence-based environment, classroom, and child assessment for the in-person. So with the in-person classroom, we were able to assess the children using the PALS and MyIGD. And for the in-person classrooms, we were able to use the ALCO assessment. We have also used the early education quality standards assessments and have developed quality improvement plans for both the in-person and the virtual program. And we are working closely with both of our staff in both platforms to assist them in providing support as needed for them to be able to meet their quality improvement program goals. As mentioned, with the assessments, we're able to evaluate. So we were able to implement an evaluation framework to track and report program and participant outcomes. So while our program design is slightly different from what we had hoped and from last year, we are confident that we'll be able to obtain some valuable data and report on both our virtual and in-person program. Next.
Thank you. I wanted to take a quick rewind and go back. I don't know if we can go back to the slide, but when I was talking about our virtual preschool programs, I wanted to mention that our focus for planning those programs came from a study from Applied Survey Research that showed that gave us a lens into the kindergarten readiness for San Jose children. And we were able to use their recommended 4 domains to help us plan our preschool programming. And we were able to use those domains such as motor skills, social emotional regulation, academics. And there is one more that I cannot remember right now, but we were able to use their domains to help us create that framework for the preschool programming so that our children would be ready, were given the opportunities to have those to be ready for kindergarten when the time came. And now I will focus, and now I will discuss our year 2 plan. So with our shift into virtual programming, what our plans for the year 2 for library story times is to continue focusing on the virtual aspect of our early education programming. We want to monitor the framework that we have set up and evaluate whether the activities have been, how they have been working for us, what the community response has been, what the impact has been on our staff, and the overall results. We'll be focusing on our staff resources to support our staff with coaching again. And we are working closely with researchers from the Early Childhood Institute with San Jose State University to, are helping us to assess our model of our storytime standards. They're observing our virtual story times, and we will be providing us with valuable feedback and an evaluation report that we can use to guide us for our future decision making of what our programming looks like for San Jose, what is working, what isn't, and where we can fill in the gaps. We are also focusing on Quality Standard 7 for family engagement. We are training our current staff that are providing virtual early education programming are undergoing the training program for the Strengthening Families 5 Protective Factors. And so we are about 3 weeks into the training program right now. We plan to have staff integrate the Strengthening Family strategies into their programming into our resources and community outreach. And we will be applying the self-assessment tool and developing our quality improvement plans from those findings. I also want to mention that we will also be reporting on our Storytime standards at the upcoming California Library Association conference in May, letting librarians throughout the state, filling them in on what we have been doing and how it has been working out for us, and seeing what other libraries are implementing and where we can take it from here. Next slide, please.
Thank you so much, Laura and Nari. Commissioners, at this time, we've completed our presentation for this evening, and we definitely wanted to open up for questions if there are any.
Thank you, Araceli, Laura, Nari. Oh my gosh, this is wonderful. I see Lauren here, who I know has been working very hard this year, these 2 years, actually. So yes, we just so everyone knows, because we're here, we'll open it for commissioners and other comments, questions, and I see Commissioner Jolly with her hand up. Hi.
Hello. I don't have a question. I just want to compliment both PRNRS and the library in taking those standards and really embracing them. As both Laura and Nari, as well as Araceli, mentioned, there was a lot of work that went into them, and the implementation that you guys just reported on far exceeds what could even be dreamt that first year. So I applaud you, especially dealing with having to shift for COVID. It was very gratifying to hear that. So very good work, and how exciting to be presenting this to the national libraries at a conference to follow San Jose being the lead. So great job of people implementing it. You deserve all the kudos you can possibly get right now. So from me to you, thank you.
Definitely appreciate that, Commissioner Jolly. Sometimes when there's challenges, it definitely provides many opportunities. And so we definitely are celebrating all the opportunities that we've had in the past year to grow and really service our community with a higher quality programming level. So we appreciate that.
Thank you. Commissioner Mendoza, how about you?
Same thing. So excited to see all the changes coming in, especially in this difficult year. And I just want to applaud you for that. I do recall last year when we had you do our presentation, there was mention about not the training, but the education that would be required for the new staff coming in that was going to run the recreational preschool. And so I remember we've talked before about this. We've mentioned it, that currently there isn't like a set standard, a requirement, including the minimum child development units, for example. And so I'm just wondering, I know budgets are tight and what you're doing, it's above and beyond what we can imagine, especially with COVID. But is that in your radar at this time?
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner, for your question. Interesting enough, last year we were working with our HR department as well as a consultant. I believe it's a CPS that was working with HR to first of all kind of assess what the criteria could and should be for early education within our specific program model. So they were able to evaluate different municipalities throughout California. What makes this a little unique that I tried to communicate with the consultant and with our HR is that I'd like to say that although we are a license exempt program, we definitely want to be at the quality of a licensed program. And so with that, we do need staff that are educated and experienced in early education and early child development. So they took that information and did some assessments. We got some preliminary information as to what other cities are doing, because that's kind of their first layer of assessment. And of course, they couldn't find a city within our area who's offering the type of program that we are. And so they kind of gave us a mishmash of different cities. But again, our thoughts and recommendations is that it has to be folks who have early education and early childhood development. So we continue to work with our HR and consultant to continue to develop that. It is very much in the radar of our PRNS director, Johnson Sorelli. We've also had communication and some discussion with Councilmember Arenas about our desire to be able to have those positions. And yes, we understand that it would mean, additional funds to increase salaries and those kinds of things. So it's very much in our plate. We haven't lost focus of that. And we continue to remind folks that if we want to move up the continuum of quality, we have to have those positions in place. So on our end, we're very committed and we continue to pursue those positions.
Thank you, Laura. Yes, Councilmember Arenas brought it up, I think 2 weeks ago, in a report out and had some action around it. So I really appreciate all of the support we have with our councilwoman, but also the work that you're doing to keep it in view, even though we're going through budget issues.
Yes.
We have an education policy in this city, and to meet those standards and meet the need of the 600 children that we're serving, we can't let go in any conditions.
Exactly.
So, Laura, thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Commissioner Rivers.
Hi, I just, I grew up in this area and remember calling in to listen to story time when I was a little kid. And so I just really love the idea that, even for the people who don't have compute, we didn't have computers because they didn't really exist then. But, for those people that, don't have Wi-Fi or don't have access to computers, I think it's just incredibly lovely that you've brought that reading story time back. And I just want to, give that a special kudo and thank you for doing that. Because I do, I'm a school teacher, so I work with a lot of people that, have a lot of issues with Wi-Fi and computers and, just the technology in general. And so I think it's just a really lovely, beautiful thing you're doing. So thank you.
We appreciate that. I think, the best part of those, the digital, the telephone story times is listening to the messages. So after a family, listens to the book, they can actually push a button and leave a message for the librarian. And those have just been so darling to listen to. And so some of those weeks when we were dealing with all the pivots from the pandemic, being able to listen to those stories made everything, everything worthwhile. So I appreciate that.
Commissioner Thorson.
Thank you so much for this wonderful presentation. I mean, it's truly remarkable how you've gone about implementing these both in an in-person and virtual environment. And I was curious, going forward post-pandemic, this seems like the virtual programming seems like a really great way to kind of bridge the divide between people who can afford any sort of childcare and those who, and also I guess I should add the lack of childcare facilities to meet the demand. And so the virtual environment, though not the ideal preschool environment, seems like a way to bridge that divide for those who might lack access to that preschool in-person care. And so are there plans to continue the virtual programming going forward?
For
PRNS,
sorry.
For PRNS, yes, we're committed to continue that. We found a very positive response, and in our situation, we actually surveyed our families to determine their interest in whether they wanted an in-person or virtual, and we had a very huge response on virtual. A lot of it was because some parents are already home with other kids trying to support them, or they're working from home and just really didn't have, or even just the fears of having their child out in a public setting. And so they found the virtual a much better strategy and have been very, very responsive in that.
The same is true for the library programs. On average, our virtual programs, in the morning, I'm thinking of a regular preschool program. We have about 180 participants at each of our programs. Very popular. I think the flexibility it brings to families as well. We hear a lot of families, it was difficult before going to the library. You had a certain time, but then I had to pack up 3 kids and get them there. And so families are really enjoying it. And I think our being intentional with the quality, allowing the opportunity for people to still form community is super important for us. So that second part of the story time, I think is a wonderful piece that we've been able to bring. Most libraries at this point are only offering virtual story times that are pre-recorded. So we're very unique in the fact that we do have in-person people able to gather. The children are starting to know each other. They celebrate birthdays together. So the virtual model is working out very nicely for us, and we do intend to keep it, once we're able to go back in person as well.
Thank you. So I'm going to ask one quick question of Laura and Araceli, and then we'll go to Councilmember Arenas. This might help inform. If you could tell us what is something you need to move your programs forward that the commission and our connections can help you with. If you could just, what is the first thing that comes to you that if you had this support would help you move your quality ball forward? Laura, would you like to go first?
Yes, but can I cheat a little bit? Can I say 2 things? Well, as mentioned earlier, definitely having the ability to hire staff with early education, early childhood experience would be a huge plus for us. With that, just having additional resources / funding to be able to do the training and the support ongoing, right? Because it's one, to have staff who are qualified and experienced, but it's also, it's continuous quality, right? To be able to continue to provide the support and the coaching, professional development, so that they continue to perform at that high level.
Thank you, Laura. Kind of knew you'd say that. Thank you. Araceli, how about you?
That's a tough one, Wendy. Definitely. You know, I think we're very fortunate to have our leadership really support our programs, and a community that really values them as well. We have wonderful partners out there. So if I was thinking of one thing, I think it's just that continued unity around serving the city of San Jose. Our leadership continuing doing the great job that they're doing. Our wonderful partners like at First Five, County Office of Education, Catholic Charities. You know, I think we're in a really great position to keep moving the needle forward. And I think we're definitely leveraging our partnerships. And just, you know, if I can think of one thing, I think it would just be continuing to do what we do. We're very lucky to have a great team who supports the work in the community. And we have great partners who help us out as well. So I'm not sure if I answered your question directly. You know, I think if I were to think a little bit more broadly, I think making sure in the future that we have opportunity to service our community. So making sure that we have libraries open and are able to fund them to be able to have those people come through our door in the future. Have the staffing available to be able to continue to provide these really innovative, unique services as well. So yeah, that's what I think that we need or continue to need.
Wonderful. Thank you, Araceli. Councilmember Arenas, I see your hand is up. Would you like to talk to us?
Oh, only after all of the questions are exhausted, please.
Smart. You're so smart. Are there any other folks that would like to make comment before Councilwoman Arenas? All right, you have the floor.
Manipulate the meeting. A great presentation, everyone. It was really great to hear some of the stories that went along with some of the data that you all presented on. It was good to hear about the preschool program. I mean, our preschool programs have always been very successful. And so I'm just so, and I'm not surprised because I know that our staff really steps up. And so to have it online and to have it successful, I'm not surprised, but I'm very delighted, right? And I think it just goes back to the quality of the staff there. Although, you know, the quality standards are helping us get to a place where we understand what is going to be an effective strategy. And I saw the quality standards and which ones rendered a little bit higher points in them. And but I think what we have is the right people for the job, right? It's clear to me that we have the right people for the job. And so one, I just wanted to say thank you for all the work that you're doing. I know that Laura and Araceli and the whole team works really hard, and you can hardly tell which department is which because they just balance out so well. And I really appreciated Nadi, her presentation as well. And I jotted down a lot of stuff. So one of the things that I was thinking about was, and I'm always asking this question, and so I apologize if I sound repetitive, but one of the questions I always have is, how are we bringing this information to the hardest to reach populations? I know that we center these services around equity because all of you, I know, value that, and you're doing it even before, you know, this was brought onto the national scene, if you will. And so it's part and parcel of what you do. And so I wondered, how are you bringing some of these online programs into kind of the dashboard of the folks who really need to see them? And so I was thinking about like, well, maybe if we had a partnership with migrant ed programs or some of the Title I schools, or not, you know what, it doesn't matter whether Title I schools or not, but we now have access, or the schools have access to all the devices for the children, and they could easily download the app, right, to make it really easy for these story times to happen, for the access of some of the books. And I forgot what website it was, but somebody talked about a really great website that had online access to different age group appropriate books. And so I'm just thinking, you know, just one more step, just to make it that much easier for the folks who, you know, are working a couple of jobs, who are still going out there, and just, even though we might, like although I feel, you know, I work from home and I'm on Zoom, I don't have to drive anywhere, but I feel like I'm still in the same amount of meetings. And sometimes I feel like I would like some drive time in between to decompress. I don't know how you all feel about it, but anyways, these are, you know, COVID times, and we're all responding to them. But I was just thinking about, you know, how does that information get to some of the folks who would probably benefit from it just as much as anybody else, but just don't have the time for it, and to facilitate that to them. Because I love the virtual story times. I love that Christine would talk about her experience of listening to some of the story times. You know, it just, I've never had that experience, but I just thought, oh, that's fascinating. I never knew that the library had that in, you know, back in our day. And now we're reverting back to some of the tried and true strategies. And so those are just, you know, a couple of my thoughts there. You know, I have a lot to say in terms of every subgroup, because I just think this is so exciting. I thought the SEEDS pilot sites were exciting. I hear you loud and clear that, you know, professional development and these special positions that will allow for our preschools to continue to develop are pivotal, and they were part of our priorities. They've already, my family-friendly initiative was approved, gosh, 2 years ago. We move a little slow. We're getting closer to getting there. I know. So while I'm going to continue to chip away at that, I know that, you know, we have to go through unions. We have to make sure that it works for everybody, and that we're not, you know, all of that good stuff. And so that, please be assured that we continue to move that along. We haven't forgotten about it. I know that our departments have also been forced to look at different priorities and issues, and sometimes these things get, you know, pushed to the side, but we bring them back up and say this is important once again, right? So that's my commitment to you, to continue to do that, and to continue to work with you. I'm really excited about working with the commission. I know that typically my team shows up, but I'm making a more personal commitment to show up here and to listen, so that I can also capture all the really great work that you're doing, and that that feedback that I hear during these meetings, that is also gets captured into policy at one point or another, because I rely on all of you for policy. So that's just my feedback. There you go. Oh, and then the last thing is, I was really interested in seeing if there was a breakdown of ethnicity and zip codes for all of the participants, just to see what those are, and to kind of guess where where you need to go next.
So thank you, Councilwoman Arceli and Laura. Just, is there any thoughts about how you're trying to reach children farthest from care? And do you have data around the ethnicities and zip codes that we can share?
Speaking on behalf of the library, we definitely have data that we can definitely share. Right now, we're in the process of collecting survey data for the spring. And so when we have that in, we can roll that up into a larger responses for you. The other piece I definitely wanted to mention was our partnership with First Five and the Family Resource Centers. The majority of the work that we've done has been in partnership with them through all the different pivots, and they've been wonderful. I think a big piece and something to be celebrated, and we'll be talking a little bit more about next year when we come back to commission, is within the last 3 weeks, we've delivered 150 laptops and hotspots to the FRC families, and making sure that they have the information to get connected with our larger programs. So, we have information in all the diaper boxes. So their partnership has been very helpful in making sure that we get the word out to the larger community about our services that we're currently offering. So definitely shout out the FRCs and First Five, Wendy. Thank you so much for all the work that you do and support that you give the library.
Of course, Laura.
Yeah, and for PRNS, we can also provide some data. What I didn't mention also is that we were able to increase our scholarship amounts for both our in-person and our virtual. So eligible families can get up to 75% off of the enrollment fee. I also wanted to mention, and Councilmember Arenas, you'll be hearing more of this, as well as some of you on this commission. We are working with City Innovate under the city manager's office with the University of North Carolina, Greensboro, in a 16-week research study project around equity from preschool through aftercare. And so looking at that continuum around what is the city's role in that, what are the needs and the gaps that perhaps the city could play a role, not only in program, but also perhaps policy or funding. And we just kicked that off February 1st. And so Dr. Christine Murray will be holding interviews and focus groups with community partners, advocates, city departments, parents. We want to get a cross section of folks that know the landscape as providers, partners, but also families. And we want to target families that we don't serve, because we really want to hear from them, perhaps why they don't participate in a program. What are some barriers? Because that's really what we want to get at. What are the barriers to our programs, and how can we be a better provider in the community and a better partner? So you'll be hearing more of that.
I look forward to it, Laura. That's super exciting, and it just triggered just another comment. I apologize, everyone. And this is around, maybe also, I love First Five. I worked for First Five for 10 years. We worked together, Laura, for some period of time. And now we work together again in this platform. So it's so strange, right? But it's very so familiar, so it doesn't seem strange. I'm just wondering how we're integrating some of those folks who are grassroots organizations that are really, in the midst of all of our hardest to reach populations. And I had heard from the Grail that they had applied, and I think they received a grant that provided training and advocacy for in-home childcare providers. And these are like the family friend network. It almost mirrors that, but they're doing almost the same thing for our hardest to reach communities. And I wonder how we can cross and just maximize the resources, right? So we're not duplicating services, but also utilizing their relationships with those communities, because it's so difficult to establish those relationships. And I love the resource centers. We have one in my district. I was so grateful that we have one there. But it's just one in my district. So there's more agencies than there are resource centers. that are doing some of this work. And so I wonder how we can integrate them. And then as well, the resource centers, because we want them to be kind of the hub, if you will, for families all over San Jose. But there are these grassroots organizations that are working and doing some of this great work as well. So just a thought about how do we maximize those resources. But anyways, I apologize, everyone. That's it. I'm not saying anymore.
No, thank you. So if everyone is good, I also want to thank this incredible team. And then I'm going to say on behalf of the team, since the Councilwoman is here, I would love for this to be free, not 75% off. It's hard enough to come up with 25%. Having a preschool that's a cost reimbursement to the city is a bad look. And so I would advocate for that as well. My little plug at the end. But I want to thank you all for what you do on behalf of our children, and anything you need from us, we're here.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Okay, so guess what? We're up to checking in with Councilmember Arenas' office to see what's going on. It's Kylie or you, however you would like.
Well, now you're going to hear from me again. Kylie has been taking, as you know, Monica's place. And so, she'll share that with Mariela Garcia, who came on board as well. I have such a great team that they can alternate. And I think they just do a really quality job in representing our office, because our values are congruent, and we're just, we're marching to the same beat, if you will. So just to give you a little bit of a wrap up in terms of what we've been doing, what we've been focusing on, and as kind of a report, primarily, we this last year we worked on a lot of just securing money for our childcare, for our digital inclusion. We fought against other competing interests and priorities to make sure that those two things were nicely funded, not completely funded. Absolutely not. We need a lot more money for those areas. I once again will continue to make those areas part of my priorities for budget, because we can say they're priorities, but if they don't have any funding, it doesn't really mean very much for our programs and for our residents. And so I'm continuing to work with all of you, especially, Jill, who's done just a wonderful job in helping with closing that digital divide. And it's quite a bit of work behind the scenes, as you can imagine, to get all of these devices, to get some of these hotspots to work with these contracts. And so I have to recognize that you and your team have done such a wonderful job in ensuring that our families have what they need so our kiddos can learn, really. And I see the benefit every day, because I get to, I have a 6-year-old and I have a 12-year-old, and well, the 6-year-old lets me watch her class a lot more than the 12-year-old does, but I get to see some of these kiddos with these devices, and it just if they didn't have them, I'm not sure where would they be. And so thank you, and I know the commission supports those efforts and supports a lot of what our library already does. And so I'm really grateful to all of you for pushing some of these priorities as well, because you prompt us to move on budget and priorities and all of these things that involve memos and process and whatnot, right? And the last thing I also want to say about our library, as well as our PRNS, is just I marvel at how they were able to really pivot during this pandemic and just really keep the lights on for all of our residents. Some of them not literal lights, right? Because there were online services, but for some of our folks, like you heard in our preschool, and you didn't hear about our learning pods, but those are also open and running and provide an opportunity for families to get back to work and to have some recovery or some relief. And so those are absolutely important. I'm continue to work to make sure that there's, these license exempt opportunities, as well as license childcare framework or network, network of providers. And things that are related just to this particular library and education commission. One of the areas that I'm continuing to work on, and I'm glad you said that kind of the last note in your comments, Laura, was that you want them all to be free. And that's really what I want us to have, is free preschool, free, everything. As you all saw that the last time that we had a recession, the programs that were cut were the programs that couldn't render participants and that couldn't pay for their services. And so basically the community centers that stayed open were the community centers in areas with a lot of resources, right? Like the one in my district, Evergreen, and Almaden, and just different parts of San Jose. And I want to make sure that this time around, as we recover, that we don't make the same kinds of decisions, that we don't close libraries and we don't close community centers in the areas of the most need, because that's exactly where we should have longer hours and more staff and more programs, because we know that these parents and caregivers are going to look to us because they're tight on in terms of their budget, and will look for some free and available services. And so I'm continue to be committed there. One of my priorities is going to be youth programming, and so I look forward to working with all of you around that. Something not related to this commission, but I want to also share with you, is that my other priority that submitted, we were to submit 2 priorities per council member. I think just for manageability, past years you could submit a bit more. And the other one is around sexual assault and sexual assault survivors' Bill of Rights. As maybe you have heard me say, because I say this anytime I have an opportunity, and that is something that I don't like to tout about San Jose, and that is that the highest number of sexual assaults in San Jose, and for the last 8 years, are against our children, especially children under the age of 12. And most of those are young girls of color. And so we want to make sure that we disrupt that pipeline. And I know that this issue is a little removed, but I know that you work with children. And this is also an issue that I hope at some point we can work together on, as the work isn't finished, to create systemic changes, so that when these things happen, that there's a higher closure rate for cases for our survivors, as well as exams available for our survivors. So those are some of the priorities that I'm continuing that relate to all of you in terms of this commission. And then I just really hope that I can, you can call on me and let me know. You can always connect with Kylie or connect with Alicia, schedule a meeting with me. I'd love to hear some of your thoughts, because that kind of fuels my fire, if you will, for what I'm doing next, and how to approach an issue, as you all are doing the really good work out there. So those are my updates, and just hanging in there as a mom to as many of you are. I can see the smile that is creeping up on all of our faces as we remember some of our breaking points during the week. So anyways, congratulations to all of you who are parents or caregivers, or just people who love our children and provide and share in the responsibility of the support system that we have here in the city of San Jose. So thank you so much for your service.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Commissioner Rivers, I see you have your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to sort of piggyback on what Sylvia was offering. and Jill and I had talked about this as well. I've actually written a book based on healing from childhood sexual assault in particular. And so if anyone has an interest in that, I went ahead and put the link in the chat. And it really, the intention is it's very positive. It's not heavy. It's meant to guide us into, into a better space within ourselves. It's not outward facing, it's very internal. So anyway, I just wanted to offer it in case that's of help to anyone, because it is a very, very, life-changing and life-affecting occurrence that doesn't have to, impact everything for the rest of our lives. There are things we can do to heal. And so this book is filled with ideas, and it's a workbook. So it's mostly writing and drawing and that kind of stuff too. So anyway, I just wanted to offer it. So thank you. Thank you for bringing it up, Sylvia, because it is really important.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I saw you post it out there and I'm very proud of you. It's so exciting. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you.
Of course. We are moving on to updates. So update from the chair. The only one I have, Jill, do you, sorry, you don't, you're good. The only one I have is that today it was announced teachers and childcare workers, along with farm workers and other support staff, will be moving up in queue. February 28th is when they'll begin to schedule their appointments for vaccination. And so that's great, right? We're ready to go. The teachers and the childcare workers. And I have to say, on behalf of our CEO at First Five and my other hat, she really pushed for childcare workers in those work groups to be included in teachers. She is retiring this year, so anyone who wants to send her a little wish would be great, but it's one of the things she does. And so I'm really proud of that fact that childcare workers are included with K-12 teachers. So the thing I challenge Parks and Recreation and Library is how will we advocate and make sure that all of your folks who are librarians and recreational leaders, but in fact childcare workers, how will we push them in queue? Because we really want to make sure that the folks that you just did a whole presentation on childcare and early education that you are actually doing, so you qualify. So I just want to offer that up from my announcements. I'm going to open it now. I think, oh, sorry, I lost track of where we are. I think it's Jill, right? There we go.
Oh.
Thanks, Jill.
Yeah, no, and I wanted to start off by saying that we were going to hold it as a surprise for Commissioner Rivers, but we do have many copies of your book on order at the library, both print and the ebook, which was a little bit delayed. So
thank you.
Of course. No, of course. We've always valued your perspective, and thank you so much for contributing to our collection now.
Oh, well, thank you. Can I just say one quick thing about it too? I have recorded an audiobook as well, because I had quite a few people tell me that they had vision issues, and so it was difficult for them to read paper or the electronic. And so that is coming. It's approved, but it takes up to 30 days to get posted. But eventually it will be there, in case that the library is interested in that too. Thank you for buying it. That's incredibly touching. Thank you.
We'll make sure that our collection manager follows up on that. But thank you. So a few little updates. As the commission knows, the library has been offering Wi-Fi hotspots for some time. We initially worked with the school districts to make sure that our students were accommodated. And then we wanted to work with partner organizations in the community to ensure that we could reach the hardest to reach households. And we were concerned that if we just put all of the hotspots into our collection and made them reservable with the rest of our collection, that sometimes what can happen is that folks who are more adept at utilizing the catalog, let's say, or utilizing the computer, will place holds on everything and they won't be available to other folks. So we did not place them on reservable hold to start, but after the first 4-month checkout period, we really wanted to get the hotspots back out again. And so we've made them reservable in the catalog. And so now anybody can go in and reserve their hotspot. We are still only doing targeted promotion in certain communities because, again, we don't want them, it's not like they need to be available to folks who don't need them, but we want to make them as accessible as possible. So they are in the catalog under sjpl.org/hotspot/members or /SJ Access, or you can just search in the catalog for hotspots. Next, we want to thank our donors. As the commission knows, we held our first holiday laptop donation drive this holiday season. Donated laptops were refreshed, and we received nearly 700 laptops donated by our community. They will be repurposed by our HP volunteers that will help them provide to many students and families and other library program participants who need access to technology, not just a hotspot. So it's for a computer as well. The Holiday Laptop Donation Drive in partnership with HP and the San Jose Public Library Foundation. So the drive went from December 1st to January 30th. And we, of course, we want to thank all of our partners, especially our foundation, who I know is here, and our staff who supported the laptop drive. We also held our first annual virtual winter reading program this year from December 13th to January 31st. And it included a reading challenge and storytelling contest, which was a short story or comic making contest. The program was for all ages and encouraged reading, creative writing, and art expression. So we ended it with almost 1,400 readers for the reading challenge and 132 storytelling submissions, which included 90 short stories and 42 comics. We had a wide range of submissions by age, with our youngest writer being 3, transcribed by mom, and the oldest writer was 77. The winners for the reading challenge were announced last week, and the storytelling contest will be decided by the end of next week. Also, some of the commissioners may remember that last year we had some controversy around a resource known as lynda.com, which is a fantastic online learning resource that we subscribe to, so it's free to all of our users, and that it had been purchased by and was converting to LinkedIn Learning. And the controversy at the time was around the fact that LinkedIn had very different privacy rules, let's say, than any vendor that the library works with. And so the library world was up in arms around this violation and we were basically faced with losing that resource because we couldn't continue to subscribe to it. The great news is that the library world is very powerful, and LinkedIn stopped and listened, and they have relaunched LinkedIn Learning by adhering to all the privacy concerns that librarians and the American Library Association had raised. And so we are now transitioning to LinkedIn Learning. It provides our users with access to over 16,000 online courses on a wide variety of topics that teach on-demand skills from real-world industry experts. It also has programs in 7 languages and is completely free with your library membership card. So you can reach it from sjpl.org/LinkedIn Learning. And then just 2 other things, or maybe one other thing, was that we have, because as you've heard over the year, it's been such an amazingly challenging year, such a different year, and that our staff citywide have really risen to the challenge. So we have put together a 2020 impact report to really capture the ways in which our staff and our programs have pivoted to serve our communities. The commission has provided invaluable feedback as our staff presented about the ways that we went virtual and the ways that our communities were still engaging and needing our support. And so that will be coming very soon. We will ensure that all the commissioners are emailed a digital copy, and then it will also be made available on our website. It's called the SJPL 2020 Impact Report. And that concludes my report. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Jill. Any questions from commissioners? I only have one comment. Don't mess with librarians.
If you know the author Neil Gaiman, there's an amazing quote. If you look up Neil Gaiman librarians, I won't say it because it's not appropriate, but it's an incredible quote about that same concept.
Nice. All right, so we're moving on to comments and announcement. I'm wondering if we have any youth commission report or not tonight.
I do not believe that we do.
So the next one is meetings attended by commissioners as commissioners. Are there any commissioners that want to talk about meetings they attended since our last meeting? I see you, Commissioner Allen. Yes, please.
I was able to attend the Career Online High School virtual graduation, and I want to give kudos to the organizers because it was extremely well done. I especially enjoyed the student profiles, being able to learn more about each one of the graduates, and then being able to see them with their families and their decorations and their caps and gowns. It's always one of my favorite things to attend. And even though it was virtual, I think it was a wonderful way to recognize the accomplishments of these students.
Thank you. I also attended. It was amazing. Commissioner Thorson.
I attended the mayor's town hall budget meeting last Thursday and asked about the library budget. And he said that as much engagement and feedback that we can provide throughout the budget process, that that would be helpful during these times when so much about the budget is still up in the air in terms of additional funding from the federal government and state government and that sort of thing. So just wanted to share that with everyone because I know that we'll be hearing about opportunities to provide feedback throughout the process going forward.
Thank you for that. Commissioner Mendoza, you're next.
But just briefly, I attended the virtual graduation as well. And I just wanted to add that I thought it was a neat note that the donators were able to get a little thank you with the picture and the profile of the student that they sponsored. And I know the Evergreen Branch, the Friends of Evergreen Branch Library donated and sponsored one of the students, and they were thrilled. They were excited to make that connection. And so I thought that was a little extra touch that made such a huge difference. And I do hope that as you know, the program continues, that you do get more of support for that awesome program. We can tell what a difference it's making in their community. Thank you so much.
Yeah, that was great. And the coaches, oh my gosh, it was wonderful. Are there any other announcements from commissioners who attended meetings as commissioners? All right, thank you all. We're going to move on to the San Jose Public Library Foundation Board report. Hillary, you're going to give it?
Yes.
Yep. Thank you.
Yes. So you'll soon be receiving the annual report for 2020 from the foundation via email. And another exciting development is that the final payment for the Pat Dan Legacy Endowment came through. So that fund is now over 200,000 that's permanently restricted for the benefit of children at the Almaden Branch Library in her honor. And the next full board meeting is March 17th, which I'm pretty sure is in the Wednesday right before our commission meeting. So I'll have more to report then. But in the meantime, there's an advocacy committee that's made up of members of the San Jose Public Library Foundation Board and the Friends of the Library, and I'm also part of the committee. So if you would be interested in participating in the advocacy committee as well, we're planning to meet once a month. Going forward, our next meeting happens to be tomorrow at 3 p.m. But basically, the goal is to messaging, advocating for the library, and engaging with other community members and organizations to spread the word of support for the library. So if you're interested in that, please let me know and I can get you the information.
Thank you. Thank you so much. That's great. Moving on, of course, we have our upcoming opportunities on our agenda. Please feel free to look at the calendar for the next events coming up. And so then I'd like to ask if there are any future agenda items that are not covered in our work plan that folks would like us to think about and address. Okay, then we'll move on to our next meeting is on St. Patrick's Day. So I suspect many of us might be wearing those colors. And March 17th is our next one. And thank you all for tonight. And we are now adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Thanks, everybody. It's always great
Thank
to
you.
see you.
Good night.
All right.
Right.
Oh, it's so nice to see everyone's face now. Okay. Bye, everybody.